Today, we're diving deep into Fresno's housing market. And let me tell you, the story that data tells is probably not what you're expecting. You hear that the national market is cooling down, right? Well, Fresno is a whole different beast. It's a market completely divided, with some spots following the trend, and others, well, they're heating up in some really surprising ways. Let's get into it.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big picture, what's happening nationally. Then we'll zoom into Fresno and look at the areas that are cooling down, just like you'd think. But then, and this is where it gets fun, we'll uncover the towns that are holding steady and count down the hottest spots that are just completely bucking the trend. And finally, we'll put all the pieces together to figure out what this all really means.
All right, first things first. To really get what's happening in Fresno, we have to start with the national scene. This is the backdrop for everything else we're about to see.
So, we've all lived through it, right? The last few years have been an absolute roller coaster in real estate. And the story everyone's telling is that the wild, pandemic-fueled buying frenzy is finally over. But is it really? The truth is, it's a little more complicated than that.
This one number really says it all. A 0.1% increase in typical home values across the entire country over the last year. That's basically nothing. The market has slammed on the brakes, the explosive growth is gone, but at the same time, it's not exactly a crash either. It's just flat.
So why the big slowdown? Well, it's kind of a perfect storm. The crazy pandemic rush is over. Mortgage rates are way up, which puts the brakes on buying power. But there's still not enough houses to go around. And that limited supply is keeping prices from totally tanking. The big takeaway is that growth has stalled, and in some places, it's even going backward. Now, let's see how that looks in Fresno.
Okay, now for the local story. Let's see how this national cool down is playing out on the ground in Fresno, starting with the parts of town that are doing exactly what we'd expect.
And at first glance, the data seems to line up perfectly. You look at the national trend, you expect some cooling, and that's exactly what you see when you look at the bottom of the list for the Fresno metro area.
I mean, just look at these numbers. Shaver Lake took the biggest hit, dropping almost 15 grand in value. And even the big hubs like Clovis and Fresno saw prices dip a little. So, case closed, right? The cooling trend is confirmed? Well, not so fast. That is definitely not the whole story. And this is where our simple story gets a major twist. Because while some places are cooling off, a whole different group of communities in the Fresno area is marching to the beat of its own drum.
See, instead of dropping, a lot of cities actually saw their home values go up this past year. Now, we're not talking about explosive gains, but what we're seeing is this incredible resilience that just flies in the face of that cooling market story. This is our first big clue that something really unique is going on under the surface here.
You can see that resilience right here. Places like Dunlap, Kerman, and Selma are all in the green. And yeah, these numbers might seem small, but remember that national flat line of 0.1%? Compared to that, a 1.8% jump in Selma is actually pretty strong. It tells us there's still some serious local demand in certain pockets, keeping prices on a slow and steady climb.
Okay, so we've seen the cool down, we've seen the stable middle, now it's time for the real shocker. The cities that aren't just growing, they are absolutely thriving, defying everything that's happening nationally.
So let's do it. Let's count down the top 3 fastest growing real estate markets in the entire Fresno metro. These are the neighborhoods that are just laughing in the face of a national slowdown with some really significant price jumps.
Coming in at number 3, Orange Cove, a 5.2% jump in typical home value in just 1 year. To put that into perspective, that is over 50 times the national average growth. And notice the typical home value, around $286,000. It's one of the more affordable cities, which really suggests that buyers are out there hunting for value.
And in the number 2 spot, we have Prather. Now this is interesting because here, the story is all about the raw dollar amount, a nearly $15,000 increase in value. But what's really fascinating is that unlike Orange Cove, Prather is one of the most expensive areas on the list. This shows there's still a ton of demand even at the high end of the market.
And the number 1 fastest growing real estate market in the entire Fresno metro is Caruthers. It saw a price increase of over $15,000, which is a 4.3% jump. That is just a powerhouse combination of both a huge dollar gain and a huge percentage gain, making it the undisputed hotspot in the entire region.
So let's take a breath. We've got falling prices, steady growth, and booming markets all happening at the same time in the same metro area. What on earth is going on? Let's put all the pieces together.
Here's the most important takeaway from all of this. There's really no such thing as the Fresno housing market. It's not one single thing.
It's more like a patchwork quilt of dozens of tiny micro-markets, and each one is telling its own unique story. Your experience could be totally different from someone who lives just one town over.
This right here illustrates that divide perfectly. On one hand, you have Shaver Lake, the single most expensive city on the list, and it saw the biggest price drop. On the other hand, you have Caruthers, a much more middle-of-the-road, affordable city, and it had the single biggest price gain. It's a total tug-of-war between affordability and luxury, all happening at the exact same time.
And that leaves us with one final, really important question to think about. In a market this split, where some of the most expensive areas are cooling off, while more affordable ones are heating up, what does that tell us about what people actually value in a home today? It really suggests that the very definition of a valuable home might be changing right before our eyes.